You're very welcome to another episode of the Scaling Your Business podcast. Delighted to be joined by Tony Frawley, the CEO of Macmarts Software. Tony, you're very welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Rian. Delighted to be talking to you today on a relatively gloomy Monday morning in Ireland.
Sure is. What part of Ireland are you in at the moment?
We're based in Limerick, actually. Yeah, so we've had poor weather over the weekend. It's been raining nonstop, so we're hoping the sun starts to shine soon.
Are you a Limerick hurling fan?
Oh, I am, absolutely. Yeah. We suffered long enough, Rian. So we're enjoying our I suppose our spell over the last few years, and certainly looking forward to the semi-final this weekend.
A magnificent team to watch. All my family, apart from me, are from Kilkenny, so I'm a Cats fan. I don't know whether I want us to beat Clare, which means we have to face Limerick, which I'm terrified of, or lose to Clare like we did to Cork last year, but then not face the battering that Cork got.
Yeah, well, certainly, I don't think Brian Cody will be too worried either way, to be honest with you. Kilkenny always show up for the big occasion, and look, he beat us in 2019 in the semi-final. Brian Cody outsmarted us, and if that hadn't happened, would you believe we'd be targeting a 5 in a row this year? Would you believe, if we get over the semi-final? So yeah, it's an exciting time. I think Limerick is certainly buzzing in anticipation for the game of the weekend, and hopefully now we can deliver.
Absolutely. Once it's a good game is all I ask for.
Exactly.
So with that, I'm assuming, I know I looked at your LinkedIn, you went to secondary school on LinkedIn, but Limerick fan, I'm assuming you grew up there. What was life like growing up in Limerick, sorry, take it back.
Yeah, Limerick's a great place to be born and reared, to be honest with you. It really is. I spent a couple of years working away. I lived in Australia for a while. I lived in Dublin, but I always had a hankering to come back to Limerick. Quality of life is great here. I went to school in Mungret National School, which is going to be a huge school now, just outside Limerick City. And then I went to secondary school in St. Clement's College, again located in Limerick City Centre. So a great place, a real great place to be if you're a sports enthusiast. So I played all types of sports. We're a sporting mad city. Limerick has unfairly gotten a very bad reputation from the wider media over the last few decades. Completely unjust, to be honest with you. So yeah, I'm a very proud Limerick man, I have to say.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan. Beautiful place. I've been many a times to Limerick, and you're right, it does get. I haven't seen much lately, which is probably a positive.
Yeah.
I want to move into, you said secondary school, then you went to university. When I looked at your LinkedIn, the overarching message was you studied marketing, but you went to a variety of different colleges. First of all, let's start with, why did you pick marketing?
Yeah, it's a good question. I guess for me, very early on, I always was interested in business. That came probably from my father. My father worked in business from a very small age. I always watched him coming through the door with his briefcase in the evening time. So I definitely knew I liked business studies. When I went into secondary school, I had a very influential teacher who very sadly passed away a number of years ago, called Bernard Doyle. And he was a business studies teacher in St. Clement's College. Superb teacher and mentor, I have to say. So that probably really copper fastened my like for business studies. And when it came to doing my Leaving Cert, it was all business studies subjects that I wanted to do. Yep. And when I decided to go to college, it was going to be something to do with business studies. So I selected marketing at the time in Limerick Institute of Technology, which has recently been renamed to TUS. And so it was a marketing course I started off doing, and I actually transferred then into the new business studies program, which was founded in LIT when I was gone into second year of marketing, and business studies then became a 4-year degree program. And I transferred into that then. Gotcha. in LIT.
That makes sense. You mentioned Bernard Dunn being the teacher, being an influence on you. That's a question I typically like to ask people. If you go back to your childhood, they can typically pick 3 to 4 people, whether friends, acquaintances, family members, teachers, that had a massive influence on them. Other than Bernard, is there anyone else out there that you feel that had an influence on you in your early years that's helped you become the person you are today?
Yeah, but that's a great question. Your formative years are extremely important. Definitely my family, without a shadow of a doubt. I obviously had mentioned my father earlier, and being the businessman and going on to have a great career himself. But I would say for sure my grandparents would have had a huge part in the person I've become today. My parents were very young when I was born. So I had 4 grandparents, Rian, alive up to a few years ago. Would you believe?
Wow.
So I spent a huge amount of time with them. They taught me an awful lot. Taught me a lot of the values that are very dear to me still to this day. How to treat people. How to appreciate things and be grateful in life. So I would definitely say that my 4 grandparents would have had a huge part to play in my in how I was reared.
Yeah. Well, shout out to your grandparents. I want to move on to the work experience side of things. I've got notes here. I'm looking at them on my right hand side. If you see my eye span, but focus on your previous roles first before we go to your current position. If we roll back to the years 2003, you spent almost a year as a marketing executive at Cook Medical, 3 years then as an account executive at Smurfit Kappa, another year as a marketing manager, and then 18 months as a commercial manager at Norman Lauder. That brings us up to 2010. So within all those years, 2003, 2010, variety of different roles, I'm sure a ton of experience. But if you can pick perhaps 1 or 2 skills or behaviors that you improved or learned in those years that has helped you in your current position as CEO, is there anything you can pick of? And I guess what I'm getting at the question is, statistically, anyone who goes out by themselves as an owner, normally late 30s, early 40s. And I'm a big believer in going to get an experience working for other people and then going out by yourself. And hence the question.
Yeah, it's a great question. So you come out of college and you try and find your way in the world. I spent my first couple of years working in a number of different roles at different companies. So to answer your question directly, I would say there was 2 things. Yep. Number 1, the importance of team is absolutely extremely important. And, I learned that very early on in my career. And the second thing was the importance of understanding how important the customer is to your business. I had a superb sales manager when I worked in Smurfit Kappa, and he taught me so much more than I could have ever learned around how to look after a customer when I was in college, and how the entire business depends on looking after your customer, understanding your customer's pain points, and developing solutions around that. In fact, I remember him telling me one day that, Tony, he said, a lot of people don't realize this, but the customer has the power to fire everybody from the board down. So we must look after the customer. The business exists because of the customer. So I've always been extremely customer centric. And I guess that's the marketeer in me, is go to the market, understand who your customer is, what are their problems, what are their pain points, and what solutions can you deliver to make their life better. And that's held, I still hold those principles today. That and building a very strong team around you to look after the customer. It's not rocket science, really,
Yeah, I like that line of the customer has the power to get rid of anyone from the board down. That's one I'm going to rob, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no problem. No problem.
Again, just before we jump on the Macmarts, another thing I noticed on your LinkedIn, you might want to spend a couple of seconds giving it a shout out, is Cleanest Foundation. You're a board member there yourself.
Yes, I am very, very proud to be a board member of Cleanest Foundation, an incredible charity started by Brendan and Terry Ring after the very sad loss of their daughter, Cleena. When their daughter was sick and undergoing treatment for a number of years, they recognized the financial struggles that other families were having in relation to the non-medical costs associated with caring for your child. So they're the things that people forget exist for mom and dad. They're the accommodation costs, parking costs, bills, all that kind of stuff. And after Cleena passed away, they started Cleanest Foundation in her honor, built a super team around them, very strong board members. And I think that's it's 14 years now in existence. So I've been a board member for the last 3 years. And look, we're trying to support families who are looking for financial assistance. They're in dire straits, and we do. Every month, unfortunately, we get more applications from families who require assistance during a very difficult time in their lives.
I will leave a link in the comment section wherever anyone's listening or watching this if they want to learn more about Cleanest Foundation. But Macmarts CEO, you'll do a much better job at the elevator pitch or 30-second commercial than I will. So the mic is yours, Tony.
Sure. Well, I guess Macmarts is a scale-up company. Originally, the software was built by our parent company, Mactivate. It was built in 2017 to help bring together disconnected systems, to help manage spend and manage suppliers in one central repository. And it was very successful for Mactivate, and they actually showed it to one of their core customers at the time who were having a particular challenge and problem in that same area. And we actually deployed the software to Mactivate's customer at the time. So they've been using it since 2017. And last year, the founder of the company, Michael McNamara, decided to actually take the software Macmarts and spin it out from the parent company into a separate software company, which is now called Macmarts. It's a spend optimization platform. So it helps primarily manufacturing companies to optimize their spend. So expedite and speed up the purchasing approval process, ensure companies are getting value for money by putting business into a competitive arena, and ultimately to bring control over their spend. And that's a huge challenge for a lot of manufacturing companies, Rian. They can't easily identify where their actual spend is at in real time. So if you're running a particular cost center, you'll be managing your budget, but you won't know where your actual spend is until the end of the month, typically when you get your spend report. So it's hard for you to catch overspending early on. And that's, in a nutshell, is what our software solution delivers.
I can certainly see the potential in the growth of the software. I noticed that you moved into if I'm correct, 10,000 square foot HQ.
Correct.
Earlier this year, late last year. So there's obviously growth plans on the horizon. One of the tools I like to use is a tool called Care, Kare. Essentially, just draw two lines across a paper, horizontally and vertical, and put Kare in each of the boxes. Keep, attain, recapture, and expand. And they're focused on accounts. So what accounts I want to keep, what accounts I want to attain, what ones I want to recapture, and what ones I want to expand. I want to focus on the A, which is the attain part. And I'm curious to know, how do you plan to attain or win net new logos over the next 10, 12, 18 months with the growth plans in mind? What are some of the way I'm gonna get the wording wrong here, but the best ways for you to acquire net new customers? Is it at conferences, networking events? Is it cold calling? Is it tapping into referrals from current customers? Talk me through some of or even content creation. Talk me through some of the ways that you're planning to grow and land net new logos over the next 12 to 18 months.
Sure. Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I guess the company where we're at the moment, at the stage that we're at, where we can get real predictable revenue streams from is in our outbound prospecting process. So I'm sure, of course, marketing is important as well. In some of those areas you talked about, content marketing and networking for sure. But we've developed a go-to-market strategy, which is a very highly automated outbound prospecting system to speed up that process. So we're using LinkedIn Sales Navigator to develop our pipelines. We're integrating with Seamless, which helps to identify who the key decision makers' contact details are. We are using a CRM system then to build out the pipeline. And then we're using a software solution called Outreach to manage the entire sales engagement, which automates a huge part of that prospecting process for us. And that's something that's very predictable. Once you're quite clear on who your ideal client profile is, that's the key part of this. Definitely. So we have a very small commercial team at the moment. It's myself and a new senior account executive who came on board recently as we start to commercialize the software. So we're doing it at scale. We're laser focused on the types of decision makers and industries that we're targeting at the moment, based on where the real need is, where the real pain is. And we believe that this is a repeatable process that gives us control and predictability in our pipeline. We can play the numbers much more accurately that way, as opposed to waiting for potential leads to come in on a blog post we wrote or a webinar that we run. They will come in time, but for now it's that outbound prospecting process that we have in place.
I like to hear that you've identified your ICP and your messaging and the pain sentences for those particular people. You mentioned 4 things you leverage. CRM, that's great to keep everything kind of on top of everything, let things slip through the crack. Seamless.ai, fantastic tool. There's a number of them out there. I've used Seamless, and it's great to get the correct data on that prospect or suspect, whatever you want to call them. Sales Navigator, another fantastic tool. And very then Outreach. I've not used it. I've heard plenty of positive things about it. So if you don't mind spending 20 seconds talking about how has Outreach been a great tool for you guys?
So it's early stages really in our use of Outreach, and there's a number of different sales engagement platforms out there. But what it allows you to do is allows you to set up different sequences, whether that's a high touch sequence based on a particular prospect that you're targeting, medium or low touch. So you decide what the sequence is going to be and you automate it. So typically, Rian, what it'll always involve is personalization. So you're not sending out a mass unpersonalized email. The first email that goes out to the contact is personalized in recognition that you've done your research, you've identified the prospect in the company, and you're reaching out to them. But after that, then you set the sequence in place, which pushes you forward to do the right things, which might be, if you don't get a response, then you follow up with a LinkedIn invite, a connection request, that a phone call comes in on a certain date, the second email goes out. So it's all sequencing. And what we found so far, would you believe, is that the third email seems to be the one where we're getting traction. And I can also say to you as well, the shorter the emails and the more to the point they are, the better.
Definitely the shorter and more to the point. If I get emails on the long, sometimes I won't even read them.
Yeah.
Couple other questions I want to ask in terms of growth plans. You've taken on the new space, so are you planning to bring even more team members on board over the next 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, absolutely. So we moved into the new HQ about 8 weeks ago. So we have a very ambitious plan to grow the team out over the next number of months and years. We're a team of 9 at the moment, as a scale up. Remember, our parent company, Macmarts, is in the building as well. They're a very successful SME, which we've been spun out from. So yes, we have a very ambitious plan for growth. But what I would say as well is that I'm not championing the fact that we're going to give a big headline number, the amount of jobs we're going to create. Success for me is how efficient we can be with the resources that we have. Excuse me. So talent acquisition is a huge challenge, as you can well imagine, in our industry at the moment.
Yeah,
it's not easy to get talent, and certainly, there needs to be something of real interest to bring people on board a scale up.
absolutely.
Our new CTO joined us recently, and he was a great coup to bring him on board. He's a very experienced guy. He's worked with 2 startups that have scaled and gone on to great things, and he wanted to come back down into this environment again, as a senior architect, to ensure the platform we're developing out is scalable. So yeah, we're very ambitious, I have to say, in the next couple of weeks and months.
You mentioned the word efficient with your resources that you currently have. So is there a tool out there that you use as a CEO on a daily or weekly basis that you couldn't live without?
Oh yeah, there's a number of them. So one of the first decisions, it can be controversial in a lot of companies, but we went all in on Google Workspace as opposed to Microsoft. What I've certainly found over the last few years in switching from Microsoft over to Google Workspace is the collaborative nature of Google Workspace is superb. It really allows us to collaborate here in Ireland we have developers in our development center in Mumbai, much more efficiently in how we share and collaborate on calendars, how we're sharing on documents. So I would say Google Workspace is superb. We also use a tool called Harvest, which is very, very good for time tracking. So we have a good handle on tracking the time that goes into developing software and developing new features. It gives us a really good idea when we're building out anything new, roughly what do we think we're going to be estimating our resources to, who are going to be working on and allocating them on different projects. So both those tools, I think, are I certainly would be absolutely good to have them. And our CRM tool that we're using as well. That's absolutely essential. I mean, anybody who's trying to scale out a company not using a CRM tool isn't really at the races, to be honest.
For sure. You are also a part-time lecturer at UL. On your LinkedIn, it says in marketing principles and consumer behavior. What do you like or enjoy most about that?
Yeah, so that was a real baptism of fire. I was delighted to be asked by Yvonne Delaney in UL to do some lecturing in the university. What I like most is being able to teach the practical application of what students are learning from an academic perspective, to bring real life stories and case studies that I've been involved in and align them with the theory that they're actually learning from an academic perspective. For me, it's also opened up and brought me back into academia. After, it's a long time ago since I did my master's, so that's been hugely valuable to me as well. And to be associated with the University of Limerick, I mean, it's on our doorstep here, and it's an incredible institution that's expanding at a rate or not. So I've enjoyed all of those things. It's also brought many new connections for me because it's postgraduate level. So the students are already working full time. So I've built out a great network of new contacts as well since I've gotten involved with it.
That's amazing, especially from the contacts point of view. You're basically just kind of getting a new wave of contacts every single year.
Yeah, and I haven't lectured now the last 2 modules, but certainly all throughout COVID is when I started. So you can imagine it's all done online. All done online, so very little face to face, Rian, which is a challenge because of COVID. Everything done digitally using Moodle, which is the software they use over there. But yeah, it's been a great experience to date. I'd highly recommend it.
Final question for you, Tony, is if you were talking about education, if you were the Minister for Education and you had to add a mandatory subject to the secondary school curriculum that's not currently on it, what mandatory subject would you add and why?
That's a really interesting question. A mandatory subject, it's probably the marketeer in me again, Rian, but I would pick communications. I think communications needs to be thought as a full-time subject. I think it's something that really, when you come out into the workforce, that really sets you apart. Your ability to be able to communicate, to understand your audience. Everybody communicates differently. Introverts and extroverts communicate very differently. So I think communications would be something that I think I would love to see being brought in. It's become even more important in the post-COVID era where people need to really dial up their interpersonal skills as well. So yeah, I think communications would be the answer.
I like that answer. Tony, it's been a pleasure having you on the show for the last 25-30 minutes. I wish
Likewise,
you and Macmarts continued success. But for today, we'll leave it there. I'll leave links to your websites, your LinkedIn account, anything else I mentioned, Cleana's Foundation, if I've got that correct.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Cleana's Foundation. Cleanas.ie is the URL.
Perfect. I'll put all them wherever you're listening or watching to this. But thanks again for being my guest today, Tony.
Rian, it was a pleasure. Thanks very much.